And joining us now to discuss the crypto markets is Joshua Lin, head of derivatives trading at Genesis Global Trading. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So Bitcoin below $30,000. You know, media outlets are reporting that Bitcoin has wiped out all of its 2021 gains. It hasn't happened yet, but it's dangerously close. So what is your assessment on Bitcoin's price direction?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a little bit of the reversal from, the very, very strong price performance that we saw in Q1 of this year. Obviously, Q1 saw, and Q4 of last year to some extent, saw the entrance of a lot of new institutional participation into the space. And a lot of that was driven by sort of the upcoming, major milestones and liquidity events that were forecast for early 2021. Notably the Coinbase listing on equity markets. That was a big focal point for a lot of institutional investors. And I think now you're seeing a lot of those sort of, macro investors starting to they certainly were, on the sidelines on the way down. Now they're starting to look for entry points to sort of allocate more capital into the space. And you're kind of seeing that in some of the headlines that you see, big fundraising rounds for notable companies in the space. But I think, as we get to this, hover around this $30,000 level, you're going to see a lot of people start thinking, when is the right point to get back into Bitcoin?
So when is it? How low can it go as they look for entry points? What's the new support level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, some of the key levels that people talk about in the market, there's certainly a lot of public balance sheets now that have some exposure to crypto. And, the sort of the average price of a lot of those balance sheets is relatively well known. One of them being from MicroStrategy, another one being Tesla. I think a lot of people are looking sort of in the mid-20s as a point where kind of psychologically, that's kind of where a lot of newer entrants are kind of got in their entry points. And so the question will be like, once we get to those levels, what are people going to do? Is there any sort of pressure to liquidate or rebalance portfolios and things like that? So Bitcoin and other crypto assets obviously have a tendency to overshoot. So we think, sort of in the low 20s, if it gets to that point, that's kind of where people will be keeping an eye on the levels to sort of allocate back into the space.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, Tesla is also draining its 2021 gains. What can you say about this parallel? Is there one?
Yeah, I think Tesla's obviously been very vocal at times, very supportive for crypto. And at other times has been a distractor. Obviously, Elon has made a couple of statements just around the sort of social, environmental aspects of crypto, of Bitcoin in particular. I think what we're actually seeing in the market now is a little bit less of an impact from those types of sentiments, like the sort of ESG sentiments. I think a lot of people understand that Bitcoin is one of many sort of technologies and blockchains that are evolving in the crypto space. And that's kind of what we're hoping for as institutional investors, as a dealer in the space, that no one single person or one single sort of corporate balance sheet can dictate the direction of the asset class.
All right. Yeah, it's interesting how Tesla interacts with Bitcoin. They hold a lot of Bitcoin in their treasury, but of course the CEO, Elon Musk, announced earlier this year that they will no longer accept Bitcoin as payments, potentially triggering the sell-off that we've seen, as well as promoting the dialogue, the narrative that ESG concerns within the Bitcoin space are something that institutions should look at. But nevertheless, how are you hedging your risk amid all of this volatility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what we're seeing is, because of the nature of investors in the space becoming more sophisticated, more institutional, we've seen a huge pickup in particularly our derivatives segment. So especially as compared to kind of the growth that we've seen on the spot trading side of our business. We've seen a lot more people using options to hedge their downside exposure. And there is a liquid market for Bitcoin and Ethereum options. And people are, particularly sort of the venture-like investors in the space are using the liquid assets and the options markets in Bitcoin and Ethereum to hedge their exposure to other assets in the space. So I do think, when you see a lot of these majors and kind of the performance, a lot of times people are sellers of those assets as a way to sort of reduce their exposure to other other certain, let's say, DeFi exposures or smaller cap tokens that they have in their book. I would also say, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks has been folks adding sort of 1 month to 2 month put options into their portfolio. A lot of times it's been sort of that part of a systematic program to hedge their downside exposure.
What kind of strike prices?
Yeah, it ranges anywhere from 30 to 25K. I would say that those are kind of where people are focused, close to at the money, where they can get some meaningful sort of mark-to-market gains on those positions if we see a moderate correction. And I think that's sort of like, that's the thought is, we will see some sort of longer-term range-bound activity around 30K. But if we do break, it would be a substantial break to the downside. So I think that sort of systematic hedging is definitely picking up a lot. And you're seeing that actually being reflected in kind of like the skew, right? So the demand for, or the implied volatility on downside versus upside. And that's really at elevated levels we haven't seen in a while.
Joshua, we got to wrap, but before we do, I just really quickly want to get your outlook on Bitcoin in the next 3 months compared to the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the next 3 months, we should expect crypto to sort of consolidate around here. We do think that people are going to be picking sort of assets to focus on, particularly revenue generating tokens in the market. We've seen a focus on NFTs and gaming, as well as sort of the catalyst surrounding Ethereum. There's a lot of things going on with EIP 1559 in the next couple of weeks. So I think in the next month or two, that's kind of where the focus will be, trying to find out performance opportunities.